Alright, we're going to be dealing with the sacrifice of the yogi. I'm going to go ahead and start out with quoting a couple scriptures. I'm going to break this down. I put out a chart that way we can go over each idea without getting lost. So I'm going to go ahead and go into it. It says, the awakened sages call a person wise when all of his undertakings are free from anxiety about his results. All his selfish desires have been consumed in the fire of knowledge. Now, when it says selfish desires, you gotta remember that's this whole wall right here, this whole side of the board right here, which would basically be objects of desire, wealth, desires themselves, food, and so on. So it says basically all of his selfish desires are consumed in a fire of knowledge. Now, the fire of knowledge is basically right here. This is the altar of the mind. Remember, it's nothing but your mind, and that whole altar is really your whole spinal column, your whole inner world, but particularly, it's your brain, right? So that's the altar of the mind. It says, the wise, ever satisfied, have abandoned all external supports. Their security is unaffected by the result of their action. Even while acting, they really do nothing at all. But key thing, it says, the wise are ever satisfied and have abandoned all external supports. Now, what is an external support? External basically means that you have your internal support, which would be the spiritual world, right? God, or the spiritual world. But then you have an external support, which is basically talking about things in the external world that you depend on to make you happy or to make you content. And so the external world, I don't have it here on the board, would be support like family, society, relationships, friendships, so on. These are external supports. So it says the wise is ever satisfied, ever content, has no attachments, and has abandoned all external supports. So a support will basically be like a crutch or be like a foundation. But you can't have your support or foundation be weak, and that's what the external world is. It's not dependable. So why would you walk or why would you live in something that's going to cause you to stumble? And that's external support. So it says the wise, they're ever content because they have the internal support. They don't need all the support. Everything else is just a part of the furniture that comes with the house. But the foundation of the house is within, period. So it says their security is unaffected by the results of their actions. Even while acting, they really do nothing at all. So the wise man basically is the yogi, right? And when we're dealing with yogi, yogi comes from the word yoga. Yoga is not just hatha yoga, which is stretching basically and getting in tune and getting your healthy body, your healthy temple. But yoga is yoking yourself to consciousness, or the consciousness or the awareness of God within you. That's yoga. It's yoking yourself to God. Yoga literally means yoke. So yoga comes in many different systems, many different types of yoga. But basically all yoga is different methods to be able to connect yourself to God. That's all. So right now we're dealing with particular types of yoga, like Jnana yoga, Bhakti yoga, Raja yoga, Kriya yoga. These are different yogas we're dealing right now. But the world, mostly what they are familiar with is Hatha yoga. But a yogi is someone who's a practitioner of yoking themselves to God. A yogi is someone who's yoked to God. They found a method to yoke themselves to God. So it could be music, it could be art, it could be meditation, it could be chants. It can be basically any method that keeps your mind, the fire of your mind, right? The fire of your mind burning up all of the thoughts outside of God. So that's what a yogi is. So that's what we're dealing with today, is the sacrifice of the yogi and why they have to sacrifice. But let's keep moving. It says their security is unaffected by the result of their action, and even while acting, they really do nothing at all. So a yogi is basically someone who has abandoned all external supports and all external action, and they really do nothing at all. Even while they're doing something, which would be washing, bathing, eating, they really aren't doing anything. You see, there's no meaning to what they're doing. The only meaning of their life, or what they really are involved in, is God. Is God consciousness, or the spiritual awareness, or spiritual enlightenment. That's all that they're doing. But the other, outside of that, they're doing nothing. Free from expectations and free from all sense of possession, with mind and body firmly controlled by the self, they do not incur sin by the performance of physical action. So key thing, it says free from the expectations and from all sense of possession. Now, free from all expectations. Expectations basically are you thinking that you are entitled to get a certain outcome or a certain object. But it says free from all those ambitions, all those expectations, and free from all sense of possession. So at no point do you feel like you possess any object that you get. It's really not yours in the true sense of who you truly are. It's the ego's object, not yours, and you are not the ego, and we'll break this down. But it says, with mind and body firmly controlled by the self, they do not incur sin by the performance of physical action. So it says the mind, right, this is this world, and the body, the whole body, controlled by the self. Now God, when I have God here, God is your Atma, your Pada Atma, or your higher self. These are Sanskrit or Eastern words, but basically it just translates to your higher self. And in the Hebrew system, you know, it has I am that I am, Ahaya, Asha, Ahaya, or Ahya, or Yah, and that basically means to exist or to be conscious. So that's who you truly are. The body is the temple of that self. The body is the temple of that God or that true self. But the ego is something that does have the expectation and does feel like it has ownership over possessions. But the true self doesn't have no reliance on objects or anything of ownership. It basically renounces that because of objects and sense objects, it gets in bondage. Self or God gets in bondage to this material world. So the bliss of God is basically getting free from the physical world, and that is your true self, trying to get free from this physical world. So let's keep moving. It says they do not incur sin by the performance of physical action. Now physical action, no matter what you do, whether it's good or bad, good or evil, is going to cause a karmic debt. Because with every one of these desires and objects or wealth and food comes with what? Brutality. You have to consume something, and everything that is that you're eating has to suffer at your expense for you to feel good. Same thing with your desires, whether sexual, monetary, whatever type of desires, you are the one entitled and get privilege at the expense of somebody else. So it says objects. Objects are basically ownership. So if you own a whole continent, like let's say Africa, you own the whole continent of Africa, your ego has basically caused sin and caused suffering to so many different people. So Africa, or you're any continent, just try to conceptualize this. There is a race for different individuals to be able to conquer whole masses of land. And inside of that land you have what? Gold, resources, objects. You have objects. You have cars, buildings, resorts, TVs. What I mean by TVs is electronics, basically. So on and so forth. Property. That's the race, is to get these objects. So the race or the competition, somebody's going to lose and somebody's going to suffer. So that is why it says they do not incur sin by the performance of physical action, because any physical action is to get these things. Well, you incur sin indirectly through, like I said, karma, which is not just what goes around comes around, but it's really one action causes the cause and effect of another action or other actions. Okay, it says they live in freedom who have gone beyond the dualities of life. Now the dualities of life basically is everything is split into pairs. So on a egotistical level, duality will be you and somebody outside of you. So you got to live beyond that, get freedom, get liberated, and go beyond that, because that will cause what? Warfare, competition, and all of these other different things, right? Another duality is sexuality, right? It's constantly a tug of war of power between the genders, right? Because we're looking at it as separate individuals, or a duality. So you beyond what? That duality, and you become what? Free. Free from what? Competition, free from suffering. Same thing with food. You're free from being happy or being or suffering or being happy because you got the food or you don't got the food. If you just live on it, be content with a minimum amount of food, then you can focus on even higher, more things that will give you much more bliss and much more accomplishments. Whereas if you just eat food, or if you just deal with your addictions, then you'll basically become stagnant and you'll begin to rot, right? And basically begin to die and not able to grow, produce anything. So you have to get over the dualities of joy and suffering, or joy and pain. And you have to just deal with what is. And once you deal with what is, you destroy the illusion of what is, and you realize God within you, within this temple. But you have to sacrifice these illusions, right? Let's keep moving. it says competing with no one. So it says they live in freedom who have gone beyond the dualities of life, competing with no one. They are alike in success and failure and content with whatever comes to them. So very key thing that it says competing with no one. So that in the dualities of life, you compete with everybody. So when it comes, like I said, to the ego, which is self-identification with something that is of a form. So that could be race, that could be nationality, that could be you know, you're short, tall, all these different dynamics to our human social relations of how we differ genetically. Well, that all comes from the ego, and that's dealing with duality. When reality is your soul, or the essence of who you truly are, who we all truly are, is beyond the temporary body that we in. It's only 100 years, and basically, if you can imagine an ant being egotistical that it's an ant, or anybody being egotistical if we only lived 1 minute, if our life was only just 1 minute, and then we changed form, then what is that to be egotistical about? Well, just scale that 100 years to 1 minute, and there you go. And that's how the gods, or the higher beings, the angels, and so on, Elohim, the Neteru, the cherubim, all of these different names for these deities, that's how they view us. That our one lifespan is just basically like a minute to them. So it's ridiculous for us to cling to these egos or these forms. But it says competing with no one, they are alike in success and failure and content with whatever comes to them. So with the dualities of life comes competition out the gate. Like I said, with the ego, which is the flesh, and then sexuality is another one. So there will always be gender wars, or the female versus male in a society where they don't practice these higher spiritual concepts, but don't have no idea about these philosophies, because they're thinking that love actually exists, you know. And these myths that we believe in, that we were told, are to give us the construct of duality, whereas the reality is everything is one, but it's taking on many different shapes and forms. And so the only thing that can happen when it takes on these different shapes is it perpetuates competition. It perpetuates a power struggle. Who's going to dominate? Who's going to control the situation? And when you're deprived of being the one in power, or the one being in control of things, then you feel like you're a slave or in bondage. So this is a subconscious thing that plays out in young societies that aren't old enough to know the mysteries of life or reality. But we're breaking all of those myths and all of these mysteries right now. So it says beyond all dualities, duality could be rich, poor, black, white, Asian, African, all of these dualities, male, female, short, tall, fat, skinny, all these different dualities, they cause what? Competition, and competition creates what? Winners and losers, and that creates what? Suffering. So it says that the yogi, right, lives in freedom, and they go beyond the dualities of life. And it says competing with no one, they are alike in success and failure and content, and they are content with whatever comes to them. Check. So let's keep moving. It says they are free without selfish attachments. Their minds are fixed in knowledge. It says they perform all work in the spirit of service, or dharma, and their karma is dissolved. So very key. So while you're alive, it's saying that a yogi, so the ordinary person, they basically living for their selfish attachments, for their selfish desires. But it says a yogi, or wise men, they perform all their work in the spirit of dharma, or service. Now dharma basically could be just helping or removing suffering from everyone in your environment, or every changing the quality of life of the people around you. That's basically dharma. So it could be alms or charity. It could be like a school teacher. It could be someone that's a judge, trying to give people justice. So these are different types of dharma. And basically dharma basically means the holy law. So it means you able to protect people from oppression and suffering in many different ways. But it says they perform all work in the service, in the spirit of service, or dharma, and their karma is dissolved. So if you are able to sacrifice your body in this life by practicing dharma, you remove all of the karma from previous generations, and which is your own self, your own sins, your own karma. And you do that by what? Burning it up on an altar of the mind or knowledge. And you can do that by freeing yourself from your selfish attachments. So key. So, and what will happen when all of this is done? Well, let's keep reading. It says, some yogis offer material sacrifices to the gods. Others offer sacrifices in the fire of Brahman. So very key. Some yogis offer material sacrifices to the gods. So they give up this material world, their desires, objects, and wealth, right, to the gods. The gods dwell in this third realm, which gives you certain benefits or gives you certain boons or blessings. So that's mostly what people are after. They're after the boons of these lower deities called the devas. In the Hebrew system, they're called the archons in the Gnostic text and so on. But basically, the lower level yogis, they basically try to appease the ancestors, which is the second realm, the devas, which is the third realm, and then you have higher deities as you go on. But it says some other yogis, they put their material sacrifices in the fire of Brahman, which is this knowledge, Brahman, or God, the fire of God. Because why? They're trying to realize God. But you have to give up you have to give up those material objects. You have to do a sacrifice. It says some renounce all enjoyment of the senses, sacrificing them in the fire of the controlled mind. So here it is again. They sacrifice the enjoyment of their senses. So now we're starting to move a little bit higher. First you renounce or sacrifice the objects and your desires in the fire of the mind, and then you offer the senses, which is taste, touch, sight, and hearing, and smelling. So you offer up the 5 senses, and you have to offer up these 5 senses because that's the enjoyment you get from the external world that distracts you from the truth or from God. It says some offer the workings of the senses and the vital forces. So the vital forces would be the breath. So they offer up the breath, meaning they do something called pranayama, which is breath control of the breath. And they sacrifice it, meaning they try to inhale as much breath as they can and exhale as much as they can, and be in a state of consciousness long enough where the exhalation lasts a long period of time. So they sacrifice even the breath. So even food and breath. So they offer up the 5 senses, their feeling, their physical feelings, their breath, and they can even offer up food. And we saw objects. So basically it's making them only be aware of the consciousness within. That's what they're doing. And that, like we said, is God. Let's keep moving. It says some offer the workings of the senses and the vital forces or the breath through the fire of self-control kindled in the path of knowledge. So when you're on this path of knowledge, that's what this arrow is right here. It's basically saying you have to offer up the breath, which is pranayama, and get control of the prana. Prana basically is like wind or oxygen from the solar energy. So you have to be able to take that in, breathe that in, get control over it, and be able to satisfy the body on it alone. So it says some offer the workings of the senses and the vital forces or the breath through the fire of self-control. Self-control is dealing with self-denial, which is sadhana, the word sadhana. So these are all concepts in the Eastern spiritual systems that we got to become familiar with. But basically, this is an actual practical practice that you have to get knowledge of to be able to get realization of God. So you have to do that sacrifice of what? A self-denial. Like it says, the fire of self-control. So the fire of knowledge is the same thing as self-control. You have to get control over your mind. And you can't do that unless you discipline it. You have to discipline it day after day or week after week. And it says kindle on the path of knowledge. Like I said, this is the path of knowledge. Because once you get past these different levels of ignorance, you become illuminated. Check. So let's keep moving. Some offer wealth or material possessions. So check. Some offer wealth or material possessions right here. Some offer tapas, which is austerity and penance. Tapas is right here. Penance is basically prostrating and fasting. It could be fasting from food. It's basically giving up all of this, basically, is what penance is. Austerity is extreme spiritual practices or ascetic practices. I can get into that in the future, but basically is summarizing the word tapas. It's all put in that one word called tapas. And tapas is this world right here. There's many worlds: Satyaloka, Tapaloka, Janaloka, Mahaloka. So there's many lokas, but tapas is how you get to the brow chakra. the third eye. You can't open your third eye without these tapas. See, check, because that's what that world is. It's the realm of penance. And it says, some take vows and offer knowledge and study of the scriptures, and some make offerings of meditation. Some offer the forces of vitality. So let's go back. It says some take vows. So those vows, key thing, which is I'm going to be promoting. If you follow me from here on out, I'm going to be promoting and helping, giving and offering people an alternative lifestyle where you can realize God and not be trapped in bondage. It says some take vows. So these vows is what the vow of poverty, dealing with not holding on to possessions or wealth, not trying to gain wealth. That's the vow of what? Poverty. All of the masters and the spiritual masters across the world, in every ancient spiritual system, in the ancient world and in the modern world, they take on a vow of poverty. It's very necessary. So first thing, then they take the vow of celibacy and the vow of minimalism, and that's dealing with desires. They cut the desires off where they start. They take a vow of what? Fasting. So they might fast for 10 days or fast for a month or fast for even 2 months, even 3 months. So vow of fasting. Some take a vow of away from the five senses, and some will take a vow of silence. A vow of silence. So there's necessary vows to realize God, and then there's extreme vows to burn up your karma. The necessary ones is the vow of poverty, the vow of celibacy, the vow of meditation, and the vow of non-violence. So these are certain vows that are necessary, but the ones that are extreme are the vows of silence, the vows of shutting off the five senses, the vows of the vows of fasting. So those are the extreme vows. But it says some take vows and offer knowledge and study of the scriptures, and some make the offering of meditation. So meditation is the sacrifice of the yogi, because when you meditate, you're literally renouncing all of these things, all of these desires, these external supports that I said earlier. You're renouncing all of them. So that's all meditation is. It's the sacrifice of the yogi, because you have the outer sacrifices where they slaughter animals, where they offer grain, they offer they offer different things to the temple. But that's the outer sacrifice, which is really has no meaning. It's really worthless, because what you're really trying to do is the inner sacrifice, because that's how you truly realize God. And that's how you truly get free from your sins or from karma. See, karma is this road down here. Tapas is your road up there. Tapas is what? Penance. So that's how you get free from karma. So that's the inner sacrifice. And in Sanskrit, they call it yagnas or yajna. You're trying to do the inner yagna. Burn up those thoughts and burn up those desires. And eventually that fire will lift up to, and you will become one with God. Inside what? The temple of your body. So let's keep breaking it down. It says, some offer the forces of vitality, regulating their inhalation and exhalation, and thus gain control over these forces and then go into a trance. Others offer the forces of vitality through restraint of their senses. All these understand the meaning of service and will be cleansed of their impurities. True sustenance is in service, and through it a man or woman reaches the eternal Brahman or eternal God. Brahman or God, same thing. But those who do not seek to serve are without a home in this world. How can they be at home in any world to come? It says these offerings are born of work, and each guides mankind along a path to God or Brahman. Understanding this, you will attain liberation. The offerings of wisdom is better than any material offering, for the goal of all work is spiritual wisdom. Approach those who have realized the purpose of life and question them with reverence and devotion. They will instruct you in this wisdom. Once you attain it, you will never be deluded again. You will see all creatures in the self and all in me. As the heat of a fire reduces wood to ashes, the fire of knowledge burns to ashes all karma. Nothing in this world purifies like spiritual wisdom. It is the perfection achieved in time through the path of yoga. Remember, yoga is the path of yoking yourself to God. That's all it is. The path of yoga. Remember, this path. Tapas, which is what? Penance. And meditation, which is dhyana. And sadhana, which is what? Self-denial. That is yoga. Yoking yourself to God. It says the path which leads to the self within. The self is nothing but your Atma or your soul or God itself. Those who take wisdom as their highest goal, whose faith is deep and whose senses are trained, attain wisdom quickly and enter into perfect peace. But the ignorant, indecisive, and lacking in faith waste their lives. So very key. So for those who are watching this, you can understand the wise quickly get this knowledge and understand, because they get that you got to shut off these senses and shut off the material world. They get it quickly. It's like tic-tac-toe. But it says the ignorant, they're indecisive. They don't really know. They're like, you know, it ain't, because of their desires, they still want to cling to an illusion and switch the truth for an illusion and keep living in those desires, because they're indecisive. They're not really sure. And it says, and lacking in faith, they waste their lives. So you waste your life. You only got one life. You're either gonna you choose this life and enter into the spiritual world or the heavens or realize God, which is supposed to be the goal of all of the highest philosophical and spiritual systems and orders, and the whole meaning of why you were even born. Or you could just waste your life and end up having to repeat this cycle of suffering over and over again, and cling to your desires and get the fruit of your desires, which is nothing but suffering, bondage, poverty, and so on. So today is your opportunity. Most people are going to waste their lives away in bondage, working for the material world for some king or for some CEO who's taking advantage of their stupidity, because they know you're ignorant and they don't know how much this life, this opportunity is worth and what you can get out of it. So they keep you in a cage of ignorance, which is the media, CNN, Fox, you know, cable TV. All they keep you in this cage to keep you your senses dull and keep your knowledge, this fire burnt out, this light burned out, and keep you in darkness and make you think the darkness is the light. So what you have to do is do like it says and not be ignorant or indecisive and be lacking in faith, and don't waste your life. Check. So take advantage of the knowledge that's available and go on this path to realize God, because it's open. It's obvious now. You're making it clear. It says they can never be happy in this world or any other. So very key. You think your desires is going to give you satisfaction, but nobody ever in human history has ever been satisfied for their desires. It's always ended either in their children suffering, their nation suffering, or they themselves suffering. It's like I saw the other day. I see all the time, though. We all see in these movies where the man and the woman will get divorced, and the woman will move straight immediately to another relationship, and the man will move to another relationship, and they'll try to move on and just do it all over again, and try to do the marriage and all of the relationship thing all over again, because they didn't learn from what they just experienced. If it didn't work in the past, what you think is the percentages of it working in the future? So the man literally put himself in bondage. Now he's got to pay, he's got to pay alimony, he's got to pay child support and all of these different things. And she's got to deal with this person for the rest of her life that she hates and resents. When it was all just based on lust and desire from the gate. They enjoyed each other for the first 5 years or for the first 3 years or whatever, however long, they was courting each other. So the sex was good, everything was good. But then the worst nightmare of a reality comes in once you get to the other end of that desire. But they jump right back in the same pit that they just got out of. And they don't know that that's what the pit is, because they think that whatever they desire is validated by God. That's the reason for life. So they put themselves back into the slaughterhouse, back into the pit, when the reality is the world is lying to you. That is going to do nothing but what cause you suffering. When you repeat the same thing over and over again, it's called what? Insanity. And that's what the Western world has got people in, a loop of insanity. So learn from the past, learn from your ancestors, and learn what is of true value. There's levels of value. So check, let's keep moving. It says, but the ignorant, indecisive, and lacking in faith waste their lives. They can never be happy in this world or another. Those established in the self have renounced selfish attachments to their actions and cut through doubts with spiritual wisdom. They act in freedom. So it says, Arjuna, cut through this doubt in your own heart with the sword of spiritual knowledge. So cut through the doubt in your heart. This is the heart. Cut through the heart and kill that doubt. With what? Spiritual knowledge. Once again, that's that fire. and says, take up and rise and take up the path of yoga. Take up this path, the path of tapas, which is penance. And so I'm going to summarize everything and break everything down one more time. Basically, all it's saying is our fall from the spiritual or heavenly planes was because of desire. You can read the book of Enoch, you can read the Bible even, but it's because of desire that our angelic form, if you want to say, or our heavenly form, got attached to the flesh or to the physical world through what? The five senses, by getting attached to these five senses. That's called the microbe world, the world of microbiology. So those stardust, those pieces of stars, remember, our spiritual true selves were originally these big giant balls of hydrogen or stars. And they emit, or they give off rays of these hydrogen atoms or photons that hit different planets but the Earth, from what? Many different levels of stars, which eventually become the sun. Those atomic particles is your soul. That's all it is. God is originally the biggest ball or the biggest being of light that was in the cosmos. There was no other light. That was God. So light is what? Hydrogen is heat, is fire. That is knowledge. Knowledge is burning away the illusion of the physical forms, these 3D, three-dimensional forms. So basically, God, this big being of light, exploded and wanted to experience reality. First thought, wanted to experience reality. So it split reality into duality, into two forms. Those two forms split into diversity of multiplicity of forms, multiple forms. And eventually, those stars, they could have stayed in that heavenly state and stayed close to the absolute and highest consciousness, but they decided, because of their attachments to the five senses, which especially touch and smell is probably what seduced them. Smell. They got attached to the physical world and got attached to the desires and the joy that came with being in the material world. So we call that microbiology. Those are microbes. That's the primordial world, or the primordial fall from heaven, becoming microbes or elements. The elements and then microorganisms. From there we become sentient creatures, and now we able to have even more obsession with objects and desires and infatuation. So basically what I'm trying to say is we built our reality on many levels from our fall. So what this is saying is, for you to get back to God, or for you to be able to get back to these higher levels of deities that you were, because you were all of these different levels of deities, and you're still them simultaneously at the same time. You are you, right? Whoever you were born as. You are your ancestors, which is your genes, your chromosomes, your DNA. You are the devas, the gods. You're the five elements, the five major elements, and the 33 elements that are the gods that are all throughout nature. You are all of those elements, and everything that is in nature, in this physical world, is in you. So you're the devas, you're the gods. You're the Prajapatis, or the great fathers. You are the constructs and architects of this whole reality. You are the higher angels, or the rishis, the seers. You are the ones who thought this world into creation, who spoke this world into creation with sacred mantras, but you weren't a human. You were on a higher, much higher spiritual level, and on and on and on up until you get to God, which is your true or original highest self. So just like a father, he creates children, and those children create children, that creates generations. Well, our original father is that higher self, or is God. So just like you can imagine your father being inside of you, because you have your father's genes, you have your father's essence, you have your mother's genes, you have your mother's essence. It's the same way with your original father or your original mother. And that original father and original mother, you are absolutely a product of that. So the point is that you have to be able to burn away all of the illusions, the layers of them, and your attachments that made you think that you are something outside of what you truly are, which is your father. And what that is these different things in the spirit, in the physical world. So that will be the objects that are outside of your body, like wealth, materialism, houses, cars, or so on. That would be family. External objects would be what? Family, friends, wife, girlfriend, or for females, vice versa. That would be Then food, the external world, food goes what? Inside of your body. So you have to what? Renounce that. That would be what? Breath. Breath is outside, but it goes what? Inside your body. You got to renounce that. That would be then desires, what your mental emotions inside of this realm, the heart. You got to what? Cut them off. Then you got to cut off what? The 5 senses. Taste, touch, smell, hearing, and so on. You got to cut them off. Because they are the gates to the external world to get you trapped into this world. Then you got to cut off thought itself, any thought that drives you externally. You got to cut that off. Burn it up with what? The altar of the mind, with what? The fire of knowledge. And the fire of knowledge, in the East they call it gnosis or jnana or gnana. You got to burn it up with gnosis or knowledge. So karma, remember I talk about our fall from the heavenly planes and getting trapped in this physical body. Well, that is what karma is. Karma is you desiring something in your mind, materializing it, and then getting caught in the web of the physical manifestation of it. And it doesn't necessarily mean if you do something bad is going to happen to you. It just means if you do something or desire something and you're ignorant of what it is, you get wrapped up in the cause and effect of it. Because whatever domino you flick or that you hit, you have to be the one to pay the repercussions for. So it's really just cause and effect. So that karma is what created this whole material world, as within, so without. So the whole spiritual world is basically made up of the highest level, the black hole, and all of the nebulas and big giant balls of gas, then the stars, then then galaxies, then stars, and then you have the planets, like different type of physical elements like the planets, and then you have physical sentient beings like humans. So those are the different levels of the physical world. But remember, that's all within inside of your body. The realm of the stars is nothing but your thoughts. The nebulas, the big balls of hydrogen gas out there, as within, so without. As above, so below. So the heavens are within you. So all of that happened in the physical world in the past is now condensed inside of you, and it's called your karma, your genes, your karma. So either you're going to keep flowing with the path of karma and getting trapped in this physical world, or you're going to use the path of tapas or yoga and return back to where you fell from. That's the point. So with that, hopefully it makes sense. Like I said, you got the outer sacrifice and the inner sacrifice. You got to sacrifice these things because God is hidden, God is veiled or hidden in these different things, these different levels of things. So you have to sacrifice and burn each veil, burn each level. And that is burning on what? The altar of the mind or knowledge. And that's what we're dealing with right now, jnana or knowledge. So it says, so now I'm going to close it reading out the Bible. It says, "For thou desirest not sacrifice, else would I give it. Thou delightest not in burnt offerings. The sacrifices of God are of a broken spirit and a broken and contrite heart. O God, thou wilt not despise." So very key thing, it says a broken heart, meaning your heart does not desire or is not attached to anything external. It's broken. It doesn't have no emotion. And a broken what? Spirit. Spirit is what? The breath. You broke the spirit. You're not attached or not imagining or desiring objects of the physical world. You surrender to the absolute God within inside the temple. So that's the sacrifices that God needs for you to realize and be able to come to God's presence, or come to the enlightenment of God. Not the fake sacrifices, which is the actual physical animals and actual sacrificing of, you know, things at a temple. But the real temple is the body. Sacrifice these things of the physical world: wealth, objects, desires, food, the 5 senses, the breath, and your ego. All for that. That's a true sacrifice. So when it says the sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart, O God, thou wilt not despise. It says a broken heart. Like I said, that's these desires right here. That's the heart. Break them, meaning that's the true sacrifice, to break those things. And it says a broken spirit, which is what? Your ego. Break it. And once those things are broken and you sacrifice them, then you'll eventually be able to realize and get closer to the true spirit and consciousness of your higher self, or your soul, which is what? God. So with that, Peace. And this is the sacrifice of the Yogi.